just an opening comment on how you see the India-UK agreement, and with some of the give and take that has happened, how do you read this moment today?
Well, both are very different in the sense is UK is an economy which is a much, much smaller, and the trade between the two countries is almost 1/10 the size of one with the US itself. And more important is when you look at from a US perspective, the US companies would like to leverage India as a staging ground for manufacturing to the rest of the world, de-risking supply chain from China. So the objectives and the intention and the size and complexity is very, very different. And India has been negotiating with UK for many, many years and culminated in signing it today itself. Whereas with Trump administration, it started the negotiation after the inauguration. And as we understand today that the proposal is in front of President Trump, and we're waiting to hear from him as to how he wants to move forward.
Mukesh, where do you think this is going in terms of the overall partnership? Because one of the key points that we are picking up is the reluctance from India, and understandably so, to give space to US imports, particularly in the agriculture and dairy space. There might be a few other points of intense conversation, but what's your understanding as to what seems to be holding up the finalization of the pact?
Well, you have to understand that this is not a full comprehensive deal like what India has signed with UK. This is stage one, and stage one is focused more on the tariff part, and whereas US at the moment has 10% standard tariff on Indian goods, and suggested prices after August 1 will go up to 26%. And that would have an impact, some kind of impact, especially when you have US companies looking at India as a staging ground to do manufacturing and export to the US. Now, more important is that between government of India and the US, they have come to some understanding. The challenge is, has the president accepted that proposal from his own cabinet to move forward? And our understanding is no. And you have to understand there are external factors which are playing a very strong part into driving a better deal for the United States with India itself. For example, you had yesterday Japan sign a deal. You have Philippines signing a deal. You have Cambodia signing a deal. Vietnam signing a deal. And what we hear is the European Union is very close to signing a deal with the US. And then China and US are meeting next week in Scandinavia to take this forward. So I think the key thing is while you want to have a good deal, you also don't want to get isolated while the rest of the world signs a deal on the average 15% tariff. So it is important. The time is of essence that India move forward, put some kind of a proposal which is acceptable to the president, and take this forward.
Do you believe that we will have finality, or do you think it will perhaps take more time?
My understanding is India has put its best foot forward, and it is on the desk of the president. And what we are hearing is he would like to expand this deal. India has drawn certain red lines, especially on the agriculture side and on dairy side, which is understandable. But I think you can work that out. You don't have to open full dairy agriculture sector. You can protect areas like rice, wheat, maize, but also look at areas where India does not compete with the US. For example, in soybean, you can open that up. India don't consume much soya. Or open up lentils, which is India's the biggest, largest consumer, and imports a lot of that from Canada itself. So move it to the United States. So I think you can skin this cat multiple ways. And I think the challenge is now we need to see what and how President Trump reacts to it and see how we move forward. But I like to emphasize that you don't want India getting isolated, because what happens is if Japan is getting 15%, and if basically Philippines is getting 19%, then India has an opportunity to drive this to a lower level, and which would be an encouragement for US companies to leverage their supply chain by moving manufacturing into India.
By when can we expect President Trump to make up his mind on this proposal that, as you put it, is lying on his desk?
I believe that the US negotiating team is coming to India next week. And what more important is there has to be some kind of communication between the leadership in India and the president to consume the deal, because you need to basically understand that president loves headline news, and if you can basically drive a deal which says we will take this trade partnership with $1 trillion, that's a good headline news. But you have to understand a trade agreement between the two countries will impact in positive way almost 1% of GDP of India, and does have impact on the US side also. So I think we need to figure out how we take this forward, because at the moment, while it's lying on the president's desk, it has not moved forward.
Given the size of the bilateral trade relationship in both quantitative and qualitative terms, I wonder if you can tell our viewers here in India what really is the United States and President Trump hoping to achieve from India. Unlike Japan, for example, which has promised massive amounts of literally hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in the United States, we cannot promise similar quantums, although there are many Indian companies which are doing substantial business and investments in the United States. What really does President Trump want from India?
Well, basically, first is strong headline news. I think it's important to understand when you look at all the trade deal announced, they're on his truth social media, and those announcements are made. We're still trying to get details on the Japan deal, the Philippine deal, and others. But I think more important is he's looking for investment, and Indian companies are investing quite a bit in the US itself. And so we need to basically consolidate that and say, okay, the Indian companies are going to invest in the next 5 years, $500 billion. When you look at last year, Indian company did invest over $40 billion into the US. So I think it's just a matter of consolidating all of that and sending one voice. More important is talking about the trade. How, this trade deal will basically create a platform for us to drive a trade between the two countries, not only up to $500 billion, but focus on a $1 trillion number itself. That's a good headline news for the president also. So I think, yes, he's looking for some kind of tariffs on Indian goods. And by negotiating a low tariff, it was going to help Indian exporters. But more important is, it's going to basically help US companies looking at de-risking the supply chain, and India becomes that pivotal ground for manufacturing.
Let's move beyond, as you very correctly put the tariff-related part of the India-US relationship. This is a relationship which previous administrations have described as the most important and strategic partnership of the current century. Over the recent past few weeks and months, we get the sense that perhaps other comments, including on brokering peace between India and Pakistan and the seeming equation between Pakistan, India and the United States, seems to have cast a bit of a shadow over the relationship. Is that assessment fair, or is this just shadow boxing?
It is shadow boxing. You have to understand the relationship between the two countries is not just tied to statement coming out of the White House. The relationship is with the full administration. Relationship is with the business community. Relationship is with people to people, especially the 5.5 million Indian diaspora. So and also relationship is on technology transfer, partnership in space collaboration, or on defense joint exercises. So you have to take into consideration the full, I call enchilada between the two countries and not just focus on statement coming out of the White House. Yes, you have a president who is ambitious of trying to win a Nobel Prize, and anywhere he can claim credit, he will do that. And I think we need to also have a thin skin and not react to every statement coming out and reacting to that. Rest of the world, the local here, the business community, also have basically built a thicker skin and not reacting to every statement coming out. So I think what we need to show is yes, basically, if he claims that he will broker the peace between India and Pakistan, so we just move on. Let's not react to it, because those statements will continue for the next 3.5 years as long as he's the president.
Absolutely. And as far as the defense relationship is concerned, this is very, very critical. And one component of that, and we've spoken about that in the past, here in a conversation a few months ago and at Davos before that, do you see, once the immediate tariff related part is dealt with, an increased defense relationship, particularly the purchase of certain high profile weapons and platforms from the United States by India? Is that at all in the realm of possibility?
No, absolutely. I think as the nature of war changes, and we learn from the last friction with Pakistan, that India basically will have to recalibrate a lot of his air superiority. And yes, that's where US can play a role. So can Israel, so can French. But more important, you have to understand the defense relationship. The US is getting more and more dependent on India, especially on manufacturing. When you look at a lot of critical components of US equipments are being manufactured more and more in India. So I think the dependence of US on India from industrial-based manufacturing is getting larger and larger. So I would say that while India will procure more, in fact, the latest helicopter delivery basically enhances the power of Indian Air Force and the Navy itself. So overall, there'll be much more collaboration, much more exchange of equipment. But I have to basically bring to the attention that as time goes by, US dependence on Indian manufacturing in defense arena keeps on going up and up.
Fair point. Let's also talk about another development which is perhaps political and also part of domestic concerns within the United States. And this is the proposal or threat of very high punitive sanctions, tariffs being imposed on India for the purchase of Russian crude oil. And I know, Mukesh, for a fact that while the Indian diplomatic establishment understands the nuances, like you put it, and has a pretty thick skin with regard to such statements, in the public mind, those statements aren't going down well. It almost seems like the United States is trying to push us into a corner. Is that assessment correct? And how serious is that threat that is being put out?
Well, Senator Lindsey Graham bill, which basically puts 100% tariffs on countries which procure Russian oil and Russian goods. And it's not just India. It has an impact on China. It has an impact on Iran. It has an impact on Brazil. And it has an impact on the European Union. In fact, the European Union is the largest procurer of LNG from Russia itself. So it is not directed towards India in particular. But yes, it does impact India, because last year, India procured almost $50 billion worth of Russian oil. And it will do that because I think you have to understand, India is an importer of almost $140 billion worth of energy on an annual basis. And it has to buy the cheapest oil it can. So it has an impact on domestic inflation. It has an impact on fertilizer. It has an impact on consumer. So it is in the interest of India to procure that. Now, you also have to understand that the domestic politics in the US, and when you have two large elephants fighting, you will have collateral damages. and we need to figure out how to manage that. I do recall almost in the first Trump, India was procuring almost 30% of his energy from Iran, and he was able to diversify that. And then, and as far as this threat goes, I think the bill is still not in front of the Senate. They're talking about giving it to the Senate, but then you have to understand the implication on European Union, implication on other partners US has. So I would say that we should be cautious about it. We should proactively talk to Senator Lindsey Graham and the people and telling them how it impacts India, especially the consumer base itself. But at the same time, I would not get too alarmed about it. I think when it comes, we'll have to deal with it, but let's deal with it now proactively to ensure that it does not impact India's import of energy from the world itself.
That's a very good assessment. I want to come back to an earlier point, and this is the opportunity that Indian companies can explore further in the United States. You spoke about how very substantial investments are happening. Are there areas that Indian companies and the Indian government could look towards, independent of the tariff conversation, with regard to the United States, both as a market as well as a destination for manufacturing, services, and other related areas?
There's a tremendous opportunity because U.S. economy is growing substantially. It's almost a $30 trillion economy, and at the same time, it has a shortage of skilled workers. It has challenges on the healthcare program itself. And let's just take example on the pharma side. Today, 40% of the prescription drugs in the U.S. come from India, and they provide billions of dollars savings to the US government. How do you basically take that 40% number to 60, 70% itself? And that's where I think you have to look at a partnership between India and the US from a comprehensive drug arena itself. And I think it's important. That's where we need to have a proactive discussion going on between the two countries. Let's look at it on the services side. What we have is today, India exports roughly over $200 billion of IT services to the US. But more important is how do we take that up to almost $500 billion? Because we have a massive shortage of software engineers in the country itself. You look at GCCs in India, almost 2,000 GCCs in India, 60% are American companies. And they're generating tremendous amount of IP for the US companies itself. You look at from as you put massive tariff on China, a lot of those goods will move into India, because you have to understand manufacturing will move into India because not all manufacturing is going to come back to the US. It took 40 years to go out, and if it will come back, it'll be more high-end manufacturing. India can play a pivotal role in that arena. For example, semiconductor. Both countries have ambitions to build more and more semiconductors in their respective countries. But US is focused on 7 nanometers and below. India is focused on 15 nanometers and above. So there is a potential to collaborate and partner to ensure that India's chips are being used, or semiconductors are being used in the US. So I think the potential to collaborate is tremendous. The positive side is very, very strong. We should not just get stuck on a tariff issues only. There's a partnership on education side, on the pharma side, on R&D side, on GCC side. You have 5.5 million Indian Americans doing a tremendous work on the GDP. We make 1% of the population and produce 6% of the GDP in the US. So I think it is important that India looks at the current trade deal and see where it can basically work out a win-win value proposition and announce it in the next 2 weeks. So at least you can get back to work rather than focus on the stress point of ensuring that the trade deal comes out, which is a win for India and win for United States.
As someone who has continues to invest so much time and effort on the US-India strategic partnership, is there something, as we wind down this conversation, that you would want to say needs to change and perhaps for the United States to give more as far as India is concerned, what does the US also need to do more than what it has already to help make this happen?
Well, we need to understand the global international order is shifting. And the United States, which after the Second World War, moved very fast to build the Marshall Plan in Europe, help Japan recover, focus on Germany to its recovery. That generous United States has shifted. And what we are seeing is a president and his MAGA right basically focused on trying to build America, and at the same time at the cost of international order. And that shift is impacting. So I think we should not set the expectation that you will have a same generous America what it was pre-Trump arena itself. When the state visit happened between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden, we saw a massive effort by United States to basically beef up India in every aspect. But that has shifted. And I think we have to adjust to that reality that it's America which is going to focus on muscular diplomacy rather than a win-win diplomacy. So from that perspective, we have to adjust our expectations and also make sure that we become much more thin-skinned and not react to every statement coming out of the White House, because what happens is it only aggravates us rather than a person who's speaking about statement on Pakistan and India and other arena. So I will say that it's important, but at the same time, you have to understand, while the statement from White House has changed, the overall administration, the overall business community, the overall people to people, the sentiment and the incentive to work with the United States continues in a much more speedy manner because there's more dependence, more stronger partnership. So I think we should not basically look at what is being said by the White House is defining the full partnership. You have to look at it much deeper and explore from that perspective.
One final point. Is there a possibility of a summit between the two leaders anytime soon?
Well, everything is possible. And I think we do have what I call is in the fall, November timeframe, a Quad summit, which India is supposed to host with head of states itself. And what we are hearing is if there's something incentive for the president to come, he will come for the Quad summit. So it's always you have to understand the president is always looking for a deal, and it is important that India starts playing that. If I use the word game from that perspective, it'll be important for the president to come to India because I think the relationship between the prime minister and the president is very strong, very positive. He always speaks highly about the prime minister. And when you look at the administration, there's a large number of Indian American diaspora supporting that partnership. So we would encourage some kind of a meeting, encourage the one in fall for the president to go to India and basically consummate the relationship in a much more stronger fashion.
Absolutely. And viewers, that was a view from the United States on a very important date as far as trade pacts are concerned. India and the UK finally signing that trade pact, which has been in the making for many years now. But the big deal is going to be with the United States, and what Dr. Mukesh Aghi seems to suggest is that we'll have to wait for the next 2 weeks, and perhaps a pivotal moment as far as the India-US trade pact is concerned is likely going to play out in that time.